I'm Angie Thomas, and I'm so excited to speak with everyone tonight and on the archive if you're listening that way. I'm a Shaklee distributor in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been a Shaklee distributor for about 6 years, but I grew up on the product, so Shaklee has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, and I just love sharing it with people and giving them the gift that I've been given. And Francine is on the other side of Missouri from me, Francine Rolling, and I love working with Francine. Francine, you've been a distributor for longer than I have, I think.
Oh gosh, yes, we have been. I've been a distributor, casual distributor, for about 18 or 19 years, but so we've been customers since then and got serious about it in January of 2015. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so it is fun to work with my Missouri sister Angie, and we're excited to get going on this topic tonight. Um, so I'll take it away if that's okay.
Yeah,
Just
please
a
do.
little bit about me. Some of the things that I've done before Shaklee and in conjunction with Shaklee have always had to do with social work and psychology. I have a degree in psychology, a master's degree in school psychology, and so of course brain development has been a big part of my education, and actually one of the other things I do right now is teach psychology classes at a junior college online. So I love this topic, and I have also worked with the Parents as Teachers program, which some of you may know, that's helping parents make sure that their children are on track developmentally. And so when we're looking at development, and we need to talk about kids for a little bit before we get to teenagers, because all of that stuff just rolls together. We look at things like their social development, their motor development, their intellectual, language, and emotional development. And all of those things form us as a person. And if there's something wrong with one of those aspects of development, we just have some struggles. We have some needs that we need to work on filling and helping make some more strides in. But what's important to note about all of those areas of development, though, they all begin in the brain. And our brains are at work before we're even born, of course. I mean, it is developing and working already when we're still in utero. So it's just amazing how much functioning is already there when babies are born. And actually, once a child is born in the world, 60% of all of the energy that they expend is concentrated in the brain. And that's one of the reasons a child's head is larger than the rest of their body, is because there's just so much going on in their brains. As a matter of fact, and I know you guys can read these PowerPoints, but if you look at the second PowerPoint, if the baby's bodies grew at the same rapid pace as their brains, they would weigh 170 pounds by 1 month of age. So let that sink in for a minute. I mean, that's just how much. I know, right? Yeah, but that's just how much is going on. And so there's all these new connections that are being formed. I mean, everything is brand new to them, and so they're having to figure all this out. So as we nourish our baby, of course, we want to make sure they're getting all of their nutritional needs met, because a lot of those vitamins and good nutrition pieces, I mean, it needs to be sent to the brain, because that's where a lot of the energy and a lot of their growth is happening from the time they are born. So with that being said, anyone who has had a teenager knows that brain growth and development is not something that happens all at once. It is something that occurs in stages, and even though so much of that energy is expended when the baby is first born, you know, it's like anything else with our development. There'll be peaks and valleys, and so there's times when there's more growth that is very rapid, and other times when it's a little more behind the scenes, so to speak. And there are many, many facets of our brain, many, many parts of our brain, and so they cannot all be fully formed all at one time. Our bodies just don't work like that. And so when we get to be teenagers, or when we parent teenagers, or when we know a teenager, sometimes, you know, there's some adjectives that I think are just very unfair that we attribute to teenagers sometimes about them maybe being absent-minded or lazy or just not being able to think things through. But the fact of the matter is they truly cannot think things through yet. The research now is saying that a teenager's brain, a child's brain, a person's brain, is not fully formed until they're about 25 or 26 years of age. And the last part of their brain to develop is that frontal cortex, the very frontal, I'm pointing to my forehead because I know you guys can't see me, but that very top part of our brain, and that's where we're able to think things through and think about consequences. And if I do this, this could happen, so I better be careful. So that's why we have teenagers who are engaging in a lot of reckless behavior, things that we would say were reckless, because not that they're just wanting to be crazy, they just don't understand and cannot think through about what some possible consequences can be. So if it seems like it's a really fun thing to surf down the street on top of your best friend's car, that does sound really fun, you have to admit, but we know that there's things that can happen as a result of doing that, but the teenager just really can't think that through yet. So that's one of the things that's going on with their brain. Another sad statistic is that a good number of children and teens are depressed at any given point in time. The estimate we have is between 10 and 15% of that population deals with depression, and it continues to go up. And some research that I just read recently out of Harvard actually attributes part of that to the diets of our children and teenagers, and we'll talk about that more tonight. And for those of you who tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you may have heard us talking about the connection between the gut and the brain, and how sometimes the gut is even referred to as the second brain. And when we're dealing with depression, that's very notable because serotonin, you guys may know what serotonin is and how that's what gives us, that high and we're on top of the world, that kind of thing. And the last I've read, between like 75 and 90% of our serotonin is stored in our gut. And so probiotics are actually now being recommended by this study out of Harvard as a way to help people with depression, specifically teenagers, because their diet isn't always great. They may be more apt to run to fast food and that kind of thing. But anyway, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But I thought that was really interesting.
And it is really interesting.
Tie, between depression and nutrition and parts of our body that we may not even attribute to being involved with depression. So another thing teenagers are dealing with, older teens, is when they're in college, 80% of them are sleep deprived. Some reporting that, they can't even function, or they're having a hard time concentrating in class, memorizing things they're supposed to be memorizing, that type of thing. I worked in a school for 19 years with students, and I will tell you too, a lot of our students who were diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, many of them were sleep deprived. They may have been in homes that may have had some risk factors, or they may just have had some other things going on, but they weren't sleeping. Sometimes that was electronics. Parents thought their kids were going to sleep, but they were in their room playing whatever electronic device they had. But that sleep deprivation a lot of times mimics some of the same behaviors that kids have when they have ADD and ADHD. So that's really interesting too.
And sleep deprivation can also be a sign of a mineral deficiency. So there's another dietary connection that also could be explored.
Yeah.
So
very interesting. Okay, and so when we're, again, thinking about the brain, we have two really key ages in our life when there's a lot of massive growth, and a lot of our skills are maybe more being fully formed and developed, skills that we use, as adults, between the ages of 2 and 3. And these kids too sometimes get a bad rap. When we have children who are 2, we're always asking, or have they entered the terrible twos yet, and all that means during the terrible twos is that these kids are getting smarter. They're realizing that they are individuals. Their language and social skills are getting better. They're able to control them more. They're able to see that they operate in this world without being totally dependent on mom and dad, and so lots of neural connections are happening. I mean, this is when 80% of the brain development is happening. It's between those ages, and so because all of these things are going on, the brain begins to prune or eliminate the things that they don't need. So this is why it's really important to offer your children lots of experiences and just keep making those connections in their brains, because what we don't use we lose. And the same thing, this another major burst of neuron growth occurs again in the preteen years, and we know that adolescents are very social. Their relationships with their peers is becoming very important to them, and so their social skills are being elevated to another level. They're beginning to seek out relationships that may be more intimate, being able to interact with people versus just relating to them kind of in a side-by-side manner. They're understanding more about emotions. They still don't have it all down for sure, and so they're making lots of mistakes. They're maybe taking more risks. Can't quite see themselves through the eyes of others, but they are getting there. They're becoming more empathetic and just caring more about other people's feelings. They're realizing that they are not the center of the universe anymore. But again, at this time, they may become maybe not as dependent again on mom and dad in the same way, because again they're seeing themselves as more independent, and that's what we want. That's the natural development. But this is also a time though that the brain begins to prune again, get rid of things that it does not need, and this goes on through our early 20s. So this is still a great time when they're teens to involve them in other activities and experiences. It's great to have a wide variety of activities for them to participate in. I know lots of kids love sports or maybe love theater, but offering them things that they may not naturally gravitate to is wonderful, because again, if their brain doesn't have a chance to experience those things, it's probably going to be a lot more difficult to develop them. Case in point, both of my daughters took piano from the time they were very young, and I never took piano, so that's probably why they took piano, because you kind of live through your kids sometimes. But anyway, they were quite adept at it, and so there were a couple of years where I asked them to teach me piano, and they tried half-heartedly, but they tried, and I just really struggled, and that really frustrated them, because they just didn't understand why this was so difficult for me, but it really was. But I was probably in my 30s at the time, and they were in the midst of all this, and I was really struggling with it. So I had lost that skill. Had I started a music lesson earlier in my life, it probably would have been much easier for me, or at least that's what I'm telling myself. But anyway.
We do hear that it is easier to learn a foreign language when you're younger. It is easier to pick up some of these things that uses the complex brain.
Right.
And I do think piano and instruments fall into that category, because you're using two different hands that have to do different things, and so it's okay, Francine, that you didn't learn
I know, and it's like a foreign language. I mean, music really is a foreign language, and and it's just, our development is just fascinating. And I read in a journal once too that when we are born, if we could actually talk, it's funny how we all come together with development, because it's not all there all at the same time when you need it. But if we could talk when we were born, we have the capability to speak any foreign language in the world at an expert level, because at that point in time we can make any sound that is necessary for any language. Again, that's muscle development, and so as you get older, when you don't use those muscles, you lose it, and so it becomes more difficult for us to roll those R's, or make those guttural sounds, that other languages require. So,
fascinating. I love your passion around this. It is This is all so fascinating, isn't it? So let's talk a little bit more about the pruning process. And I love this graphic on the left here, to grow a grown-up brain and what's going on in the brain. Kind of, I'm a visual learner, and so I kind of liked seeing that, like, there's so much activity, so much growth, and then it's going on through the age of 20. It's less dense. Um, the gray matter becomes less dense as the brain matures. And what's going on here is that pruning. And a few months ago, I was listening to NPR, and there was an interview with Dr. Anna Lembke, I'm sorry, and the interview was on the what's going on with prescription of drugs and stuff. So it wasn't on this topic, but she said something that I found very interesting. So she was talking about neurons and how they start the pruning process after the age of 6 and into early adolescence, which is very similar to what Francine was talking about. And when the neurons are pruned, the brain creates kind of a scaffolding, is what she called it. And so prescriptions early in life through adolescence, the brain those neurons are depending on those prescriptions or whatever chemical reaction they're creating in the brain. So when the pruning happens, at a time when we're using medications, it is possible that the brain's wiring is dependent on that chemical, on those chemical reactions and on those medications to be there. So when I was listening to this, I also know from other research that our brain sugar can be very addictive, and it affects the same part of our brain as, say, heroin or cocaine, and which is very scary. So what I'm about to say is not part of Dr. Lemke's interview, and she did not say this, but to me, it is very curious if the same reaction would happen when we have a heavy sugar diet, which is heavy sugars but also carbs, especially through adolescence. When we're going through that pruning process, does our brain depend on the sugar? And will it have a hard time working without the sugar? So just as what her point was, that the brain, if it's depending on the medication, when a medication is taken away, the brain doesn't function very well because it was wired now to depend on that medication. And I'm curious if the same kind of effect would happen with sugar. Just some thoughts on that pruning process, which is, really this whole topic is so fascinating. But let's talk about some of the things that we can help and we can control, and what does our teenagers' healthy brain need? So just as a car needs maintenance to run, the brain needs regular maintenance to perform its chores and premium fuel to run well. And I think when we think about feeding the body with vegetables and fruits and all of that, we think more of the body's functions, energy and muscles and bones. And at least for me, the brain doesn't always come up in that list for me. But the brain needs food and proper nutrition just as much as all the other parts of our body. So the first thing, rest. Restorative brain reorganizes during sleep. This is a big time for our brain to de-stress, kind of get its own time. But teenagers need over 9 hours of sleep. This is what Francine was saying earlier also. And there's another book out there called Nurture Shock. It is another fascinating book. Write it down. That is a really great one. And one of the chapters in there discussed sleep for all ages, but they were talking about how a teenager's sleep cycle actually changes. So while they're younger, while they're in that elementary school age, going to bed early is appropriate. The 7, 8 o'clock time is an appropriate time because of their sleep cycles. But something happens when they become teenagers where that sleep cycle changes and they actually are not tired and they don't want to go to bed until 11 o'clock at night. And so then we have, across most of the nation, high schools starting very, very, very early. I think the high school bus at my bus stop comes at like 7 in the morning. So there's no way that these kids are getting 9 hours of sleep. And the research that they were citing in this book was talking about how the class that they did the worst in was the first hour class because their brains weren't awake or the kids were falling asleep. So we may not be able to change.
I'm sorry. as I said, that's just really interesting too, because a lot of times that's when those core classes are offered is first thing in the morning, because often in afternoons, kids may have like a work study program or they may go to a vocational school. There's different things that they may be leaving school early for, and so like the math, science, social studies, reading, whatever, those are early in the morning, and they're still recovering from having to get up so early.
Yeah, yeah. And so while we can't really change the high school start time, if your teenager has already started college, maybe that is something to consider for them. They've probably already figured that out. I remember figuring out how not to sign up for the 8 a.m. classes, but you know, they might have to try harder to go to bed earlier. Taking away technology, at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, so that their brains can digest from technology, because that can make it harder to sleep. And there's a whole lot more we could say about sleep. So if that is something that's going on in your house, please have a side conversation with the person that invited you to this webinar, because we are trying to keep to a certain time also for tonight. But so exercise, this improves your mood and sleep. It's the same as adults. When we are exercising more, we've reduced our stress, we've reduced our anxiety. It's very good for our brain to have frequent exercise. And that can even just be a walk. It can be yoga. It doesn't have to be strenuous, but something that gets our body moving. It brings blood to the head. It brings endorphins going. A toxin-free environment is super, super important. Household toxins are linked to lower scores on tests. It's linked to a lack of memory and attention, poorer performance in school, and in behavior issues. Sometimes just those overpowering chemical smells can trigger, I've seen it happen in littler kids, but it can trigger a tantrum. And in older kids, it could trigger things. An older kid tantrum could look a lot different. It also can trigger things like migraines and allergies, and those are things that make someone not feel very good. So they cannot perform at their best when the environment, and that goes for the cleaning products, but it also goes for skincare products, perfumes, any sort of smelly thing that we have around us, candles, all that kind of stuff. That can be something to look at as well. Healthy diet from real food. We are going to expand on this a lot tonight. The good fuel for the brain, and there's bad fuel for the brain. So the high quality food contains lots of vitamins and minerals, and it helps. The antioxidants in the good quality food help the brain, and it protects it from oxidative stress. Bad fuel from the brain, refined sugars, impairs the brain function, and it can trigger things as depression, because sugars and carbs increase inflammation, which shows to be linked to depression and anxiety. It also can be linked to poor gut health, which is what Francine was talking about earlier in tonight's call. That is also, poor gut health can also be linked to depression and anxiety and all sorts of things. So just like every other health topic we talk about, good food is very important for brain health as well. I am completely compassionate of the fact that it is hard to monitor our teens' diets. They are a lot more independent. They are running through the drive-thru on their own. They are a lot busier. They're going here and there. And they also, it's a little harder to say, you can't have dessert until you finish your peas to a teenager. So, and I do know that it can be difficult, which is when we're going to have some solutions to that tonight. Hydration is very important. Essential nutrients are too critical to leave to chance. So Francine is really going to talk. We're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the healthy nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think we can go on to the next slide, Angie, but when we're talking about nutrition, we're not only talking about teenagers here, but the statistic recently came out from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey said that 9 out of 10 Americans fall short on essential nutrients in their diets. And when we are talking about, I get so excited I talk so fast. when we're talking about our teenagers and we're talking about our children, we as adults are probably modeling for them what's okay to eat, what's good to eat, what is worthwhile to eat. And so if everyone's nutrition is falling short, that's what our kids are seeing too. And it's so easy just to run. If you're at practice as a teenager and you're coming home late, it's so easy to run through McDonald's with your friends or some other fast food place, and we know we're not always getting the nutrients there. A lot of what kids are eating, a lot of what America is eating are things that are too high in calories and too low in good nutritional value, and it is hard. It is very hard, and nutrition is complicated. Sometimes when people go to the store and they try to be good stewards of their nutrition, and I often see people reading nutritional labels and then kind of shaking their heads or asking questions, to the person they're with, because there's just so much languaging on there that's very confusing. And is sugar good? Is sugar bad? What are is there a healthy carb? What's a bad carb? There's just so many words and languages, terms within that language that are just really confusing. So if we as adults don't understand that, of course, our kids aren't understanding that either, and quite frankly, that may not even be on their radar to understand that. At this time in their life as teenagers, they're worrying about school, they're worrying about their friends, they're worrying about activities that they're involved in. If you have older teens who are working to get into college, that is quite a couple years in your life when you're applying to schools and boosting up your Vita and all that wonderful stuff. So they're going to be eating what we're giving them and the models that we're showing them. So anyway, we all need to be mindful of that, I guess, and mindful of what we're eating and putting into our bodies. So this is just a side note. My husband and I are currently doing the 180 program, and so the other day we were in the store, and he happened to go down the snack aisle, and he pulled out a package of pork rinds. And now he's just joking, but he said, "Well, honey, I think we could eat these because there's no calories in pork rinds." So obviously not a good nutritional choice. I mean, there was no calories perhaps, but there was probably nothing else either in there that was that was going to be very nutritious for us. So we find that if somebody was to eat a diet, though, that was really very refined, I mean, we know that that's removing a lot of the nutritional value from it. Foods that are really quick and easy to prepare often are very high in calories, and so that leads to excess body weight. That leads to nutrient gaps. That also leads to things like problems with sleep. If you think about your own life, the better you eat, probably the better you sleep. When you make bad food choices, perhaps that affects your sleep, and then, as we said earlier in the broadcast, that also affects your mood, your possible depression, your ability to concentrate. It really can affect you and make life very stressful. And as a teenager, life is pretty stressful anyway. We may think that's a free and easy time, but they have a lot going on. Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, those who do have a very healthy diet that includes vegetables and fruits and whole grains, all those things that will give us the vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants, all those wonderful things we need, they have a lower risk of developing chronic conditions. And when we're talking about chronic conditions, we're not only talking about physical health, but we're also talking about our mental health as well. Again, thinking about the brain and thinking about that connection between the gut and the brain. Our mental health and our physical health, they are all wrapped up in each other too, and our diet can certainly affect both of those things.
For sure. For sure is all connected. And so we want to talk a little bit about the specific nutritional needs of the brain and call out a few things to really concentrate on. Protein, to me, is like number one. And whenever I have a parent ask me questions about their child that's struggling with anything that can relate back to the brain, I ask them how their protein is, and I specifically ask how their breakfasts are. Many, many breakfasts in the American culture are heavy carb, if there's a breakfast at all. And a lot of times, and especially when our children are starting school at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's hard to get breakfast in. So a really good breakfast really is heavy protein. I love to see kids have a lot of protein in the morning, and we try to keep away all the bad fats, and sometimes sausages and bacon. I mean, that's a protein, but that's also high in some bad for you fat. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some solutions to that tonight. But so the neurons communicate with each other via the protein. The protein is kind of that connector there. It stabilizes mood swings and hyperactivity. The other thing I like to remind people about, the word protein, pro, means beginning. It's the beginning of every cell. Every cell in our entire body can benefit from protein, and we need it. And the brain really, really needs it too. So protein should be high on your list of things to look at. Vitamin C is essential in the production of neurotransmitters that help with focus and concentration. I think we always think of this as something for, to help with a cold. It's an immune thing, but there's also other things that vitamin C is really necessary for. Vitamin D, this is called the brain vitamin. It's also, some people have referred to it as the sun vitamin, but really it's the brain vitamin, because if we think about what can happen in cultures like up in northern Alaska, northern Canada, where they don't get a lot of sun, there's a lot of depression because they're lacking in vitamin D. So that attributes back to the brain. So it helps with your memory, your mood, your problem solving. And then it's got some side benefits of helping with your bone health and your immune system, which is so great. So vitamin Bs, I love, love, love vitamin Bs, and I think Francine would echo that. They help with the production of serotonin. And vitamin Bs are something that our body doesn't make on its own, so we have to help it. And a deficiency in these can cause anxiety, insomnia. It can also, having a good vitamin B level for across the board on Bs can help with blood sugar regulation. It can help with energy. It's just a really great leveler of hormones. So it's a really vital one for so many systems. And when we're low on energy or we're low on blood sugar, that can affect the brain also. That can affect our ability to learn, our ability to communicate with other people. Omega-3s, you may have heard this, especially, this is really great when you're pregnant because it helps with the baby's development of eyes and brain, but then it's also really helpful all the way through life for different things. And for this specific topic, it's very helpful for the brain. It helps support the cell structures. It helps increase production of neurotransmitters. It blunts inflammatory damage. Inflammation can lead to some of these issues with mood and discomfort and things like that. So omegas help kind of as an anti-inflammatory. I love, love, love omegas when I have moms that ask me with any issues that relate back to the brain. Omegas are something high on my list. So specifically, this is where the solutions come in. So you're hearing a lot about the dietary needs and the lack of the ability to monitor their diet in their teens. I mean, I think all of you guys on this broadcast that have teenagers are going, okay, but great, how am I going to do this for my teenager? And we're going to talk about that tonight too. But, we have to figure out a way to get the nutrients in our children because of that lack of ability to help them with their diet and because of the huge need that their brain has right now. So Shaklee can really be helpful in that through their protein. There's a Shaklee Life, and we're going to be a little bit more specific on these in a second. We have a wonderful omega product. I'm calling out that we also have a chewable version for children that either prefer to chew or cannot swallow yet. The B vitamins can be found. We have a lovely, wonderful B-complex vitamin, which is actually what introduced my mom to Shaklee 30-something years ago, and we still are loving in our family today. The Vital-E multivitamin and mineral has B vitamins in it, and so do our chewable multivitamin as well.
So I'm glad you said multivitamin and mineral, Angie. I think sometimes we just shorten that to multivitamin, and we don't give call to the fact that there are minerals in there too, and that's what makes it so special.
Exactly, Francine, and I think it can be deceptive because people compare that to maybe something they're already taking or seeing at the store, multivitamin to multivitamin, but because ours is a multivitamin, multi-mineral product, it actually has a lot more going on to it that that doesn't meet the eye sometimes for people. The Shaklee Life Energizing Protein Shake, this is just kind of a general slide on it, but it's going to have 16 grams of protein before you add your milk. So if you're going to add a dairy milk or a soy milk, you're going to add another 8 grams, and you're going to have 24 grams of protein. And this is a fantastic breakfast because it can be made so quickly. I've had busy, because busy working moms that will make it the night before, and then they'll just give it a quick blend in the morning, and out the door they go. This is really great for if you're shuffling your kids from sports practices or or theater rehearsals or whatever, all these after-school activities that kids have right now. This is a great way to get either a really high protein snack in them, especially after a sports practice, or even dinner because we're running so much all over the place. I also want to call out that this is a really great thing to give your college students. Most dorms, it's easy enough to have a small blender in there, and they can have this great protein. There's also a lot of vitamins and minerals in this shake. There's probiotic in this shake. It's going to support their energy, their immune system, their digestive system, which sometimes in college can go crazy. And healthy weight, which is not always a problem for teens, but in college sometimes it can be. It comes in many different flavors, and this is just a fantastic option for your teen and for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about omega-3s because this is so important for everybody, but specifically for teen brains. And there's a lot of options out there in the market, and we hear about it on commercials and in magazines and in all sorts of areas right now. But it's very difficult to get a good quality fish oil because the waters are so polluted, and because of the issues with mercuries and PCBs and paraben and all that the heavy metals that are in the oceans and the rivers, and it's very difficult. And here is just one example of a lawsuit that these companies did not disclose that they had PCBs in their fish oil. And these are popular brands that you've seen on commercials and you've seen in health food stores, and you've seen, I think one of them looks like one I've seen at a chiropractor's office. So, these are brands we would probably trust, and they have been shown to have contaminants in them, which is really scary, and really, really scary when we're giving them to our children.
Mm-hmm.
At Shaklee, I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Francine?
I was just going to say, too, and we just have, to battle with the commercials that are on TV. I know a couple of those photos that you just showed on the previous slide, you see those regularly on commercials, and so people just assume that they're okay because they make claims on the commercial, and you just want to assume that's okay, but it does take a little more investigation to find out what you're really getting.
Yeah, it really does, and I think that's what I love so much about what we can offer at Shaklee is when people have questions about the quality or about an ingredient or about a claim or whatever, they just ask us and we get the answer. And if we don't know it, we can go to Shaklee Corporate and get the answer in writing or from them somehow. And it's really a very transparent company, but they are a company that puts quality and purity at the number one, and safety at the number one, priority spot, and that also is in their Omega Guard with our omega-3s. So Shaklee's is an ultra-pure, pharmaceutical-grade, full spectrum of the 7 omega-3 fatty acids. It goes through a triple distillation process to make sure there are no contaminants. There will be no mercury, there will be no heavy metals, there will be no PCBs in the omega product from Shaklee. They source their fish from very clean, cold-watered fish, but then they also go through this process to make sure that it is completely contaminant-free for you and your children and their safety. So there's a lot of benefits to omega-3s that hopefully our teenagers are not having to worry about heart disease and stroke, but it is good to know that you're helping their health for years and years and years to come. Mm-hmm. And it can also help things like ADD, ADHD, depression, their brain health. It is just a really important, wonderful product.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so now that we've talked about some of the products that may help, we wanted to share with you. These are real kids that we're going to highlight. Both of these children have a mom who has a Shaklee business too, and so their families were familiar with Shaklee products and how they could help, and they did help both of these children with different things. So the first teenager we wanted to profile was a boy who was in high school, and from the time he was in elementary school, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and mild dyslexia. So that did make school challenging, and I know this family, and I know he was frustrated at times, and of course that his family was frustrated because they wanted to help him, and so he didn't like the way the ADD medication made him feel. That is a natural, common complaint that we hear oftentimes. A lot of times the side effects, and not even, I don't know if you'd call it a side effect, but just sometimes kids kind of feel like they don't have control of their body again. They're kind of like in a fog, and not in full control of their emotions. So anyway, after battling that, and of course, if you don't like the way medication makes you feel, you may be less apt to take it. So his parents did look for supplements that could help him. And so again, remembering that this was first diagnosed when he was a child, they started him on Incredivites. He did prefer chewing, and Incredivites are nice because even as our children get older, if they do have trouble with swallowing, and rather than battling them over that, you can continue the Incredivites versus the Vitally or another multivitamin option. Additionally, they added B-complex that he was taking 4 a day, along with an Optiflora and 2 Omega Guard, and MindWorks. His parents found that really increased his happiness and just his general sense of well-being, which they saw positive results in his schoolwork, and when you're happier with your performance, you're just happier. So he was a happy kid after they found a regimen that worked for him. And then the other child we're going to talk about tonight was a teenage girl who was having mood swings that often aligned with her monthly cycle. Angie was talking a few minutes ago about B-complex and how that can really help our moods, and some people even call that the happy vitamin. And so she was taking 4 to 5 of those a day, and it's important to kind of keep an eye on how your body reacts to the B-complex and know that this is a water-soluble vitamin. And so as you go throughout the day, or as you're experiencing more stressful periods of time, or perhaps you're sick, there's lots of things that stress our body, but you may need to take more of those at certain days than you would on others. So just, again, being aware of what your body needs. Also, her family included Stress Relief Complex, the Vitally multivitamin and mineral, and Osteomatrix. And as you would suspect, these helped her moods and also helped her to feel more in control of her life at the time. She even quoted it as saying she felt more on top of her game. So she was a very active teenager, and able to find the energy and the mood and the desire to participate and be involved with her peers and in activities as well. So anyway, both of these kids both had a lot of success when supplements were added to their daily routine.
So we talked a little bit about MindWorks in that testimonial, and we didn't talk about it earlier, so I wanted to kind of give it a little note here. What MindWorks was introduced just a few years ago from Shaklee, and it is a revolutionary product. It is incredible, and Shaklee scientists found that this has both short-term and long-term effects. It improves immediate cognitive performance, so the short-term memory, but it also protects against age-related mental decline and helps support healthy circulation. It increases the oxygen to the brain, which, just sounds like a good thing. I just feel like my brain would be so happy with more oxygen. So I will note, though, that this product is recommended for children age 18 and over. The family earlier, their son was 16 when they gave it to him, but they trust Shaklee so much that they were willing to use it for their 16-year-old. But it is recommended for kids 18 and older. So there's a lot of ways we can take a look at this, and I encourage you to talk to the person that invited you to this broadcast. And but there are some simple ways that we can create a plan for you that will cover the bases that we spoke about tonight. One of those ways is the vitalizing plan. This is going to give you 30 meals through the protein shakes. It's also going to come with a vitalizer strip. And the vitalizer strip is going to include your Vitally multi-mineral, the multivitamin, multi-mineral product. It's also going to have your carotenoids, your vitamin E, and your omegas in there. And then a probiotic, which we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but that's going to relate back to that gut health and making sure you've got a really plentiful amount of good bacteria in the intestines. And then it also has your B complex and C in there also. So it really covers the whole spectrum of what we talked about. The best part for teenagers, especially those that are in college already, is it comes, as you can see on the screen, it comes in this little strip of vitamins. It is so convenient. They don't have to open a million bottles. They can throw it in their bag and take with lunch if they want to. It is just a really convenient way to help teenagers that need a lot of support in that area. Another option is the Essentials Plan. This is a little scaled back version of the Vitalizing Plan. You're going to get 15 meals of the protein shake. You're going to get your Vitally, which is the multivitamin, multi-mineral product, and you're also going to get your omegas there. And then you can also look at the a la carte options. Everything we've talked about tonight is available separately and via, by itself, and you can create your own plan with the help of the person that invited you tonight. I wanted another product that's really fantastic for protein is right there in the middle of the screen, the meal bars, 20 grams of protein in that bar, which can replace a meal. Another great idea for a college student or for a really busy teen that's going from activity to activity.
Absolutely. And just to wrap up, these are my kids who I wanted to share with you. And so, as I said earlier, we have been a Shaklee family for almost 20 years. And so when I was first introduced to Shaklee, my girls were just in preschool, and Logan was in first grade there, I believe. And you can see in the bottom picture our family's grown, and I remarried a couple years ago, and we added another daughter. Well, my husband had her daughter. I guess he didn't add her, but anyway, we now have a family of 3 girls who are all amazing. And it's just been wonderful watching them grow up with Shaklee. My girls were healthy when we were first introduced to Shaklee. Actually, I was one of those people that was fascinated by the basic H, and that's why we first got involved with Shaklee. But as the years went on, I learned more about supplementation, and so they were brought up knowing to take their multivitamin, and they drank what we called Shaklee chocolate milk for snacks, and if you guys have been around for a while, you remember the Fiber Crunch we used to have, and we'd make peanut butter balls with the Fiber Crunch and everything, and the protein. It was fabulous. And so everything was going along swimmingly until, guess what happened? They became teenagers. And so the oldest one was very compliant until she went to college. And then since I wasn't putting her vitamins on the counter every morning, she quit taking them, and she got sick, and she was very stressed. And so she asked me if she could start taking Shaklee again. So of course she did, and it was really funny. She's very successful. She's very driven, and she is one of those go-to people. So if you want something fixed, people tend to go to her. So she ended up being the person people would go to whenever they were getting sick. And she had vitalized immunity in her dorm room and later on in her apartments. And her friends knew that when they started getting sniffles or or whatnot, she was the one to go to, and she could give them some vitalized immunity. So that was good. Our younger daughter was a little more stubborn about her vitamins, never even liked to take them as a child. It was one of those things about, picking your battles, and that was important to me. So sometimes we had battles over vitamins, but she took them. She never really saw the benefit of them, though, because she, quite frankly, was never sick, so she didn't understand why that was important. But then when she got into high school, of all the worst times for this to happen, she developed all these, I guess you would call them seed warts, all over her hands. Probably, at one time she probably had between 30 and 40. They were everywhere. And so for a teenage girl, you can imagine how that is just uncomfortable and embarrassing. And we were still doing supplements, but was not seeing any real difference. We went to the doctor. The doctor prescribed some things, recommended some over-the-counter things. We did everything. She even had some frozen off, which was extremely painful, and made them even more noticeable. They were black, and it looked like she had just really damaged her hands, which she had from this freezing. So anyway, we came back to Shaklee and found that she needed to take more probiotic, and actually Herbal Blend cream was great, and did some other things to boost her immune system, and every single one of those warts went away.
Wow.
And anyway, to this day she has none. None have ever come back once we got rid of them. And then she also developed anemia when she was a junior in high school. She's a very active cross-country runner, and her junior year in high school, everything just started going down the tubes, and she didn't have any of the classic symptoms of anemia. Her symptom was that she crunched ice, which we found out later is a symptom, which is very interesting. Right. Anyway, she was so sick. Her doctor was actually talking about blood transfusions, putting her in the hospital. It was bad news. It was very scary. They actually were going to be testing her for some other diseases because her blood count was just so far off. It just was very atypical for anybody with anemia. But we asked if we could, just for a short period of time, try to supplement, and we did massive amounts of Shaklee iron and other things, and her levels started to come up. The doctors were impressed. So anyway, we avoided hospitalization. We avoided some more intensive treatments, and again, to this day, she is her levels are on target. She's great. So actually, she's considered to be not anemic anymore. And then
she needed some more some things to happen for her to realize the value of the supplements.
And she's a great example. Exactly, she sure did, and she certainly knows now. And she's a great example. She had a very healthy diet, but we cannot always get all the nutrients we need from our diet, and she was case in point. But yes, she has seen the light. And then our third daughter, who became part of my family when she was already in college, is now a teacher, and was sick a lot with cold, just kind of felt that was normal. And we introduced her to Shaklee, and she now shares that with her other teacher friends, because when other people are getting sick, she has been able to be in the classroom, be with her students, teach first grade, and not have those colds and flus and all those other things that a lot of newer teachers get, because their immune systems are bombarded with germs from kids too. So anyway, all three of these kids have realized, and they're young adults now, so I'm very excited about that. That supplementation is important, and they will all tell you that it really helps their well-being. It helps them to be able to be of service in this world, and it's an important part of their lives for all three of them. So to wrap up tonight, what makes Shaklee different? Safe, proven, and guaranteed. And I think when we're talking about Shaklee, it just comes down to the science. I don't know of any other company that will conduct as many tests, not only on site, but with third-party studies, with published abstracts and things that are in peer-reviewed journals, and just all of our patents. It's just amazing. And this landmark study is just one of a kind, because we were able to look at people who have supplemented and some who did not supplement over 20 years, and found that because of their Shaklee supplementation, they were able to be healthier in several different biomarkers. And again, this wasn't something that Shaklee just said and said was true. This was the University of California at Berkeley who did this study and backed up what Shaklee has said all along. I love that not only do we test the ingredients that go into our products, but we test after these products are manufactured too, to make sure no contaminants were picked up in the manufacturing. And Shaklee is not afraid to put a product on back order if we find that an ingredient is not at the grade that it should be. If a product is one of our best sellers, but something has gone wrong with an ingredient or with the manufacturing process, Shaklee is not afraid to say, no, we're not selling this right now until we get this right, because they look out for the best interest of the customer, which I think is extremely ethical and quite frankly rare in this age that we live in. But Shaklee is all about the customer always.
You know, Francine, and I think you would agree with me that what you just shared, this slide right here, is why you and I both feel comfortable not only consuming the products and giving them to our family, but sharing them with our family and friends. Mm-hmm. And you know, we put a lot of our reputation on the line by sharing this, but we don't worry about that at all, because these products are just, there's just nothing like them because of the purity and the quality of them, that they are safe. And Shaklee doesn't put anything out there that is not safe for the person.
Right, absolutely.
So, and the last part of our awesomeness, right?
Yes. So if all of that wasn't good enough, it is 100% guaranteed, which again, I don't know where you get anything like that. So if for some reason this product didn't suit you, even if you have used the full product, Shaklee will refund your money, 100% guaranteed, no questions asked. And quite frankly, that doesn't happen very often. In all of my years of being a Shaklee distributor, very rarely does somebody want to return a product because they're not satisfied with it. If I do have a product return, it's because somebody ordered one flavor and they decided they'd like another flavor, something like that. But generally, you know, these products do what they say they're going to do, and I think it's so nice that we're able to offer this customer service where we will work alongside of our customers and help them know exactly what this product's going to do, help them make educated choices, help them notice that the benefits that they're seeing, because these things just don't hit you all at once. I mean, you know, it takes a while to build our bodies back up, and so sometimes people expect great, big, amazing changes all at once, and we do have those as well, but a lot of times it's just that building block of getting healthy that sometimes goes by a little bit, you know, unnoticed, until all of a sudden you realize you're not taking naps during the day, you're you know, having more energy levels, and those Shaklee products are what's doing it. So that 100% guarantee is a great thing. It makes people feel, I think, really comfortable trying the products. Yeah. So what is next? What's next is to start on a good foundational plan. So you may have heard something tonight that struck your interest, and you may already know exactly what you want to do. If so, that's wonderful. If not, get back with the person who invited you here, because one of the things that we love to do is to work with you individually. There's not a one-size-fits-all. Everybody is unique, and that's why there are so many Shaklee products, but we realize that can also be overwhelming sometimes because there are so many Shaklee products. But we can help you find what need you have and what you are committed to, and it is just our pleasure to serve you in that manner.
Thank you. That is a beautiful end to what I think has been a really fascinating discussion tonight. So, Francine, your knowledge and heart and sharing has been so wonderful. So thank you for being part of tonight, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.